Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Uncommon Sense episode. I'm Joshua Barnes, the founder of Process Mentors, and I'm thrilled that everybody's joining us today. I'll turn it over to Steve.
Hello, friends of Herbie. As you know, I say friends of Herbie relating to all those who like the story of Herbie, that is the novel in Dr. Goldratt's The Goal. But today I want to refer to someone else who recently passed away, which is Dr. Edward de Bono, the, thinking out of the box, creative thinking innovator, who was Maltese, and I'm here on Malta. And I think this is relevant because thinking out of the box is always something that enriches our ideas, our world. And I think today with we'll see with Jon Ward, we'll have lots of out of the box thinking. Oh,
hi! I decided to dress up today. It's just a t-shirt, but. So I'm basically in charge of like Agile at Scale programs at the PMI, formerly with Net Objectives, and just basically been a long time. Well, it feels like I've known you for a very long time, Jon, but it's only been a couple of years. I guess it's because our interactions have been deep and good, and that's a good thing. So I'm happy to hear what Jon has to say. He's always been a thought provoker to me. I was remarking, I said it in general, but then I actually I said a measure of how fast you learn is how quickly you can go from an initial reaction of, wow, he's off the wall, to what have I not learned yet? And that's, Jon inspired me. So now I just, when he says something, it's usually, but what have I not seen yet or understood yet? He's worth listening to.
Thank you, Al. Well, I'm Jon Ward, and I have been involved in Agile since 2007. I'm currently leading a transformation with about 5,000 people with a group of Agile coaches in a major telecoms company. And I developed Agile Lineout because when I was coaching Agile teams, particularly novice teams, I found that they were struggling with Scrum. I found that they didn't necessarily focus in on what the outcome was, but they were really struggling with, getting the events right and all the rest of it. And I found that complex. It was my gut feel is that an Agile framework should enable the team, not let them to struggle. So I really sort of got to grips with this and started to decide, okay, how could we do something slightly different and help the teams, both in non-software teams and software teams, to start to become agile. So, guys, a question for you: what do you think? Why do you think the world's, well, let's face it, Scrum is the most frequently used agile framework? Why it's purposely incomplete as well, according to the Scrum Guide? But why is it so popular? Do you think that the agile community has been lazy in not fixing some of the gaps?
Well, you've got a lot to unpack there.
Well, I like to try,
One of you guys go first, but I'll jump in if you don't.
Yeah, or Steve, looks like you were trying to get in as well.
Let's see. Well, I think that now popularity derives very much from what is easy and convenient. So one component is certainly that Scrum is easy to learn, maybe not to apply, as some will say, but the Scrum Guide is 20 pages, not even that, and you can get a complete overview of what Scrum is in just a couple of hours. So that is very compelling. You come out of such a meeting believing that you are mastering, and not coincidentally, the title is Scrum Master. And by the way, I was told, I'm not sure if it's correct, that originally the title came from the idea of a master of ceremony. There might be truth in that or not, but you get this sense of being capable of doing something which which in reality, after just sitting there for a few hours, you obviously are not. But it's nice to have that illusion. So it's convenient. It's that's why I think people hook onto it so easily, and then it's also gets addicted. And we have all these other questions that it's like open-ended and so on, and that just builds on this convenience. Because when it's working because it's good. When it's not working because you're not doing something that is like aligned with this framework. Anyway, I'll leave it to you, Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say some things that are very similar. I mean, obviously the Scrum Guide is small, so it's easy to read. It seems like it's going to be really lightweight and easy to put into practice because of its size, and it's been pretty stable, right? I mean, there haven't been a lot of significant changes to the Scrum Guide, and I think that's one of the things that's helped the prevalence that it's enjoyed for so long. The other thing is, unfortunately, I think that with all of the certifications that are out in the marketplace and all the varying sort of expertise when it comes to Scrum Masters, whether it's in reality or not, it's easy to find somebody that says that they know Scrum, right? You don't have to search for too long, and that's also something that I think makes it desirable sometimes, is that there's a lot of people in the marketplace that organizations or people in human resources or whatever can go out and just find.
I'm thinking about something that's broader than the Scrum issue. And I go back, I've been doing Agile since before there was Agile. I mean, I learned XP in 99, and I remember the 99 to 2001 period, there were a whole bunch of us doing kind of XP or Scrum-like stuff, and we didn't know what to call what we were doing. I remember trying to create a name for it. I think I came up with iterative, incremental, integrated, because you did things incremental, iterative, integrated, because you did things in chunks, you did them repeatedly, and you were always trying to learn and integrate the whole process. But going back to those days, I remember really trying to promote XP because I was not doing XP. I'm not inferring that with this statement, but I had done virtually every practice in XP prior to XP. In fact, when XP came out, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Why did I not think of it? I'd done this in isolation, this in isolation. Sometimes I'm real slow. It hadn't occurred to me, what if you put it all together instead of isolated practices? And it was just brilliant. And then I couldn't get people to follow it much. Paired programming was the toughest thing. You had a bunch of people who liked working by themselves. You had managers saying, how could it possibly be more effective? But it was. And admittedly, I went into Scrum around 2000, 2001, because it was easy. You just put it in as a single team. And Scrum kind of grew from there. And it was an easy thing to do. And I don't want to beat up Scrum on this. I actually think when I was just reflecting on this question, and I've been saying, how has the Agile community been in general about taking the hard choices and doing the deep investments? And I think we have a very poor track record of that. Most people don't believe, and maybe this is another topic, I believe software is an engineering discipline. Now, yes, there's creativity here. Most people don't understand what engineering is. It's not building bridges over interstates that you've done 1,000 times before. It's not manufacturing. It's a creative process obeying the rules of science. That's a very weak way of saying it. And we don't go into that depth. And I think that's a problem the Agile community has. And I think Scrum being easily adopted and spreading and people not going deep is a symptom of that. Anyway, just throw that out.
Yeah, I like it. I think that my view is that, there's so much more that we need than Scrum. So, and the team needs other practices other than just Scrum, right? So I think this is where the challenges come. And I also see Scrum teams really sort of, in the first 4 or 5 weeks, they really start to, first 4 or 5 sprints rather, they start to improve. But after that, they're plateau. So I think there's some bits about repetitive nature and so on. In my coaching life, I find that senior execs think that if they get a Scrum Master trained and they get a product owner trained and they train the project team, then they can this group of people can deliver outcomes using Agile, right? And it's simply not that, because any team has to do three things. It has to decide what it's going to do. It has to decide how they're going to do it, and it has to decide who's going to do what. So the roles and responsibilities and how they work together efficiently. So how does a novice team know what to do? How do you think we are expecting them to learn?
Yeah, I mean, so Jon, that question I think is so important, because I use Google. I use this at my last company. I heard about this. I saw it on a live stream like, we're doing here. Yeah, it's where do they go to find something? And then how do they know as they're sort of piecing things together that it's actually going to be beneficial to them?
Well, this I just saw while you two were talking too. It's like, obviously people can't know everything when they start. They need a certain minimal set. To me, the question is, do you start giving people a few practices that they follow and they learn pretty much on their own following those practices, and then decide what to do next? Or do you help them to see what the problem is? And maybe just seeing what the problem is makes some practices pretty clear. Learning how to do iterations and time boxing is pretty straightforward. But what's the why? Can you show the why early on? And I think people are smart enough to see the why. That's often not presented early on.
Well, I think that ties well into what I typically do, where I focus on the goal, which is another way of saying the why. But from my perspective, starting at the team level, as is the common practice with Scrum and other Agile approaches, is just going to lead into major problems. I prefer to work with the organization as a whole, and that's where ideas of having like a common shared goal become very, very valuable. Folks on the ground typically are pretty smart. I would say even they have street smarts, because they are living with the problems all the time. So if you give them a direction, if you give them a goal, they will figure out what needs to be done. And this works even in large organizations. You have elements of self-management, self-directed huge organizations, provided there is this shared mental model, shared understanding of where they want to go. Now, in lack of that, I go back to what I said before. It's a thing of convenience. With Scrum, you have only a few things to do, and therefore it's easy to pick up. But going back also to what Al was saying, the why Scrum? I think many things there stem from some deep misconception of what a team in a larger knowledge work or knowledge intensive organization is supposed to do. One of the recurring reframes from the Scrum camp is that the team needs to be protected. The role of the Scrum Master is to stand there with their shield and protect the team from management. I think this is sorry to say this, but it's one of the most stupid ideas of the entire industry, because if you want to be on the same boat going in the same direction, there is no need to protect anyone. You're all one large, big team, and that's how this should work. So Scrum does work with this protection when you are in a situation of dysfunctional management. Yeah, then protecting the team is good. The team will perform better and will deliver more than what it did before. But if management is functional, if management is intelligent, if management does what it's supposed to be doing, then that is even more of an impediment than otherwise. So you can get the teams to know what they do if you give them a direction, and then they are smart. They will self-organize. They will do whatever is needed.
Thank you. So when I started looking at Lineout, what I decided is, if we know that a team needs to work on the what, if we know that a team needs to work on the how, and we know that the team has to work on the who, then shouldn't our framework provide a little bit of pointer, as Al pointed out, a little bit of direction to the team to say, you're going to need to figure this out, because otherwise, there's that saying, we don't know what we don't know. And that needs to get a team, the framework is enabling the team in my view. So I mean, similarly, sorry, Josh, you were going to.
Well, before we move on, because Steve said something that made me think of something else. So I have read Jon's book, right? That was posted earlier in the comments, and one of the things that was in that was you have the coaching plan, right? So how do teams not only know how and what they're going to do, but where are they going to get some of the direction from? And I like that you've got a coaching plan in there, and you've got some information around the coach, the team lead, the whatever we're going to call the person in that role needs to have a plan of how they're going to help support the team and how they're going to be able to move forward pretty efficiently. So that's something I always like to see that teams have. I like to call it a team adoption canvas, but your coaching plan, the way that you referenced it, I think is also something that is just a really good part of what you've got.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very good of you. I was going to say that I think that Lineout what I wanted to do is to get something that really starts to enable the team. So trying to get some of the foundational practices involved in there, and so guidance about what they need to think about, what they need to decide. As Steve quite rightly said, they get it, they understand that they're intelligent people. So, and then when I started to look at the team, how do they create an outcome? And it could be a marketing activity. It could be about software development. It could be about a merger and acquisition. All of those teams, the how boils down to, defining the scope, detailing the features that are going to be there, builds what's needed, and then checking that they built it right and getting it to the customer, right? So if we can give just a little bit, I don't want to be prescriptive here. I don't want to say you got to use this technique, but I'm just saying that what we need to do is to give the guys, a novice team, the clues to enable them to work it out. And it's all contextual, right? It depends on the outcome they're working on as to what's appropriate.
Yeah, a good starting point. I mean, if not, they're going to be lost, or they're going to be just haphazardly trying to find out what they can add into their way of working, and it may be something that'll work for them, maybe not.
Jon, I want to point out something where I got interested in Lineout from a simple thing you said that's in there, which was about retrospectives. And I hadn't actually questioned retrospectives deeply, to be candid, except for the fact that in listening to Jeff Liker, the Toyota Way guy, he talks about how learning, or not Toyota Way, Toyota Kata, so what I'm thinking of. Is that still Liker? Well, Toyota Kata, I think it's Liker. And where learning is best done, where you have this idea of what you want, you try something, you see how you moved in the direction or fell short, you try again. There's kind of a model and an experience. In my mind, it's the micro plan, do, study, act, or study, adjust, where you have a theory or an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, and you learn on a regular basis, very frequent basis, and that short, frequent learnings are important. And when you said that, I just come off an Agile project where it was small. There were 3, 4 of us. And what we were doing was kind of a continuous learning. We didn't have a retro per se, but literally we had, I wouldn't call them stand-ups, but every morning we had a meeting and we looked at what we were doing and we looked at challenges and we did these micro retrospections. Like, oh, we had troubles with this. How can we improve it? It was about continuously learning. And we also used it for queue management. If we had enough stuff to work on for a day or two, we didn't worry about creating more. But when you said that, maybe have a retro in the middle of a sprint, I was saying, wow, when you do that, you actually get benefit for the rest of the sprint. And then you made some other comments about at the end of the sprint, you're either tired or you're in celebration if you did great. It's not really where you want to do retro. So some of these things that we just accept without even thinking causes slowness in some regard. It's not much discipline. I wondered if you can speak more about that, this idea of looking deeper instead of just following a practice, really understanding what the intention is, and then seeing, is there a better way to do it that works for us?
I've taken what I've done to try and to make Agile Lineout different is I've tried to go back to the basics, to the theory, to the management theory, right? And I found I've been reading a book by Richard Hackman, and in there he quotes a lady by the name of Connie Gerslick. And Gerslick was saying that she did a study for her PhD that she looked at about a dozen teams, none of which were software teams, by the way, but she started to look at how the teams were acting. So in the beginning, the team wants to get on and understand what the scope is, and then they decide how they're going to deliver that scope. Then they say, she said that every one of the teams halfway through the task started to think about changing their ways of in order that they could actually deliver the task on time, right? So you could see this progression, and when you use a football analogy or a hockey game or whatever, we get half time, and sometimes the commentator says, wow, that was a game of two halves, and the team comes out and plays totally different. So I think that the plan, do, check, act cycle doesn't necessarily have to sit on top of the product delivery cycle. You can think of the production line, and the majority of the retrospective is around the how, not the what, because the sprint review deals with the what. So you've got and the team working as well, the behavior. So looking at the team in the middle of the sprint replicates what some of the sports teams have been doing. It's like a timeout in American football, right? It's coaching while the game is progressing. And you're doing that because you think you can improve the performance of the team. So I think this may be a key as to why retrospectives are so difficult and such a challenge. And yet at the same time, it's, if you like, one of the key aspects, because the retrospective is around effectiveness and quality, according to the Scrum.
Yeah, and I think it depends also on just where the team might be. So, if you've got a team that is brand new to Agile, they've been doing a waterfall approach or, a hybrid approach, it might take a few iterations before we would want to be doing something in the middle of an iteration and sort of, interrupting what the plan is. And it depends on how long it is. Even a 2-week period isn't really that long. But I will say one of the things that I also like to see teams use is something like a retrospective board, where they're putting things on a board so they don't forget about it. And if it's something that they want to address on that day, they have an opportunity to do a mini retro for an item that they might be able to make an improvement or a change, or something even outside of process related, just the behavior of the team members with each other, immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I put in Agile in lineouts that the fact that the team has a learning board, like a parking lot in a training.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that as well. I use a Kanban board for the exact same purpose that you have your learning parking lot.
So this gives there's two parts to this, Joshua. But what I think the one part is reminding them that they've still got something to learn, but also reminding them of what they have learned. So there's two things, because I've been reading a book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And sometimes, and this is about rowing teams, okay, oarsmen in the Olympics, actually. And basically what they're saying is that sometimes the teams lose confidence. It's like that imposter syndrome with a coach. And the board provides you evidence of what you've achieved, or what the journey that you've been on. And sometimes just standing and reflecting on the achievements on the board encourages the team to then retrospect and build.
Yeah.
Joshua, I have to take you to task. 2 weeks for learning is an incredibly long time. Anything more than a day is a long time.
Yeah, and so I agree. But I mean, having the daily coordination meeting, that's an opportunity for learning or to do a mini reflection.
Have you actually seen that? I've been in, I don't know how many stand-ups, and they're almost all about the work and the problem we have. and they're about how do we solve this problem now, or what do I need help with. They're not about the process. They're not about improving things. They're about solving problems, which is different than stepping back. So the idea of the retrospective is really good. You step back, you look at how you're working. In my mind, you should use double loop learning, not just look how well are you doing what you think you're doing, but should we not do this? Should we do a different way than what we're doing? That's what double loop learning is about, and which Scrum actually says you're not supposed to do on certain other practices that are immutable, but forget that. But 2 weeks is a long time. I mean, it means on average you're working on things that happened a week ago that you don't remember, and now you got another problem in front of you. What I remember, again, when I've worked on Agile projects myself, was the experience of, boy, something happened today, and it's really fresh in my head because it's right, it's like the alien, it's right in my face, and I want to talk about it now, how to fix it. And I have to slow down the work for a moment.
I'm not saying though that that it wouldn't be beneficial, but if you're doing your retro in the middle of your iteration and it's 2 weeks long, you're not going to do another one for 2 weeks.
Well, or maybe right? That's you got me, and that's why I would do 2 of them at least.
I get the pushback that there's too many meetings in wording. So, but
let me ask you this. Let me ask people: have you ever had a session with somebody else that you left it with great ideas and you were energized? Was that a meeting? That happens. See, people lump meetings as anybody getting together as a meeting. See, this isn't a meeting to me. We're exchanging ideas. We're having fun. Meetings, we need to separate the difference between working sessions, creative sessions, status meetings, things like that. How to get rid of that crap. The last one, that would be good. But short, how to learn.
You're basically describing many elements of what I do now. I know I'm always. We were speaking before about thinking outside of the box, and I think I am outside of the box with respect to. Oh, thank you. With respect to many of these elements, because what I do is I eliminate sprints. I eliminate the stand-ups. I eliminate the retrospectives. So you will say, well, how does it work? No, it's impossible. Well, I'm focusing on high-performing organizations, high-performing teams. And yes, you need to have moments when the team comes together. But when there is a real problem. So you need to know when you have a real problem. And there I use metrics. Let the numbers tell you when you have a problem. You were speaking before about software being an engineering discipline. And that is founded on numbers, on measuring, on giving a sense to what is happening through the numbers. With that, I produce like leading signals of negative variability coming your way, so that you can react. And on a daily basis, the team will just look at these signals. If they are green, why do a meeting? Everything is fine. Don't waste 15 minutes multiplied by how many team members you have. Conversely, if there is a problem, stop the line, like Toyota, the and-on. Stop everything. All hands on deck, swarming. If you cannot resolve the problem, go upstairs, go to the manager. If he cannot solve the problem, go all the way up to the CEO. But you cannot let things wait. If you're iterating for 2 weeks, 2 weeks is a long, long, long time. So you need to be very, very reactive. Likewise, from the top, you need quick responses. This is what I call the management by exception paradigm, where you are always like assuming that everything is fine. But if you have a signal that something is bad, then it's everyone on deck and everyone doing their contribution to solving the problems. These things become also like behavioral habits, behavioral attitudes. The attitude of the teams change when you have these mechanisms in place.
John, I'm just laughing here because I think he doesn't quite know what he's stepped into here between Steve and me and Joshua saying all these things too. I am going to step back for a few minutes. And John, I'd like you to talk about Lineout for about 5 or 10 minutes uninterrupted. So, because I know you've got some really interesting ideas. We keep injecting all this stuff. I don't want to have you lost in all.
John, before you start, and Joshua, maybe show the cover of the book again, because I believe that thing, the Lineout, Is it a rugby thing?
Yes, that's right. It's exactly just the same as Scrum.
It's Scrum.
It's another way when it's when the ball is out of touch, out of the game of play, and this is the way the game is restarted. And I like the analogy of, you see, a team in rugby, once they've done this set piece like the scrum or the line out, then the team all is going in the same direction, and the players will play what's in front of them, right? So it's all about the context. So agile teams can look at where they are, what their context is, and then adjust what they're doing, just like they do in the rugby game. The team behaves differently in a line out that's close to the line and they're defending their line. They behave differently in the middle of the field when they're in no man's land, if you like, and they behave differently if they're close to the line and scoring. So it's contextual. So I wanted something that was contextual, because I think, you know, after every iteration or sprint, the team is learning something. It's getting feedback from the marketplace. It's got feedback from the stakeholders. It's got their own learning and so on. They may have found problems. So this context assessment, this context review gives them the piece that they can say, okay, what do we need to do differently this time round? And then they can plan according to that. So I wanted to do that. The other thing I wanted is to have the same working practices for software and non-software teams, right? So let's take, for example, the iteration length. Now, iteration length, if you look at most agile wisdom, it says get it as short as possible, and we talk about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on. But if you're using an agile approach to, let's say, cultural change, then 2 weeks is far too short. So and why you have those short periods of the short length of the iteration is so that you get the feedback, all right, in the feedback loop. So you want to get the feedback loop that's as short as possible to allow the feedback, but is as long as possible to allow the activity to go. So for example, on cultural change, I'm using 30, 60, 90-day horizons. On a merger and acquisition, they might do that monthly. So basically it gives you real chance to start to get the feedback that you need in the line out. The other thing that I've got a friend on this call, Mr. Shalloway, and he said to me that you can't learn without understanding the theory. So the other thing we've got in line out is being explicit about the theory that you're applying, because my view is, if you don't understand the theory and you've just learned by rote what the process is advocated by SAFe or Scrum or whatever, then how do you do continuous improvement? Our chances of continually or adjusting or experimenting with that and getting a failure is much greater if we learn by rote than if we learn by theory. So what I've tried to do is actually in each one of the lineouts, the team behavior, in the product production, and in the ways of working, I've tried to use and be explicit about the theory that I've applied in order to get to the practice.
Oh, wait, I didn't say that. Deming said it. I was quoting him. I'm going to put that in the chat.
Deming, yeah, okay.
I mean, I did say it, but I didn't come up with it.
Well, Mintzberg said something similar. Every manager has a mental model of the world and acts on that model based on the experience and knowledge. So basically, I think what I wanted to do in Lineout was to give them a mental model in order to enable the team across all of the aspects of the delivery, the what, the how, and the who, right? So that we just give them enough. So again, it's purposely incomplete, but it's more complete than other practices, if you see what I mean.
I love that thing with the mental models because that's a centerpiece of what I'm doing. I claim that this whole agile space can be enormously simplified by having really a handful of mental models, but they need to be in the heads of everyone, from the CEO to the latest junior hire. Why? Well, because that creates a lot of alignment and creates a lot of, how can we say, implicit decision making, if I and Joshua share the same mental models, but we have completely different skills and competencies, I can be quite confident that the decisions he will make will go in the same direction that I would like to if I were in that position. And this is clearly different than having training programs where you have a lot of insistence on role-specific competencies, which you need in the technical aspects, but you don't need in the management, in the direction. I think that's another source of counterproductive, how can I say, conflicts of interest and waste of energy. So mental models are really one fundamental component, and I really don't see them in Scrum or in most other approaches. So, Jon, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because, hey, you're one of the first one I see on the ground doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Jon, I want to ask a question on some of the roles, and I think I saw something in the chat earlier. So in the roles that you've covered, you've got the team coach. How is that different, or is it very similar to what we would expect a Scrum Master to be doing? Or what are some of the differences? Maybe just focus on the differences.
I think the focus is more around the daily Scrum, right? We ask 3 fairly simple questions. And those questions are, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what are your blockers? And I don't think that does Scrum credit. I really don't. I mean, Scrum doesn't actually mention the questions anyway, but everybody seems to answer the same one. So the team coach is asking the question, are we going to get there? Okay. And then that means that the team is now starting to look at not just what they're doing today, but what they've got to do over the whole of the iteration. So that starts to put the context. Are we, for example, if we thought this activity was going to take 3 days and it's taken 5, what's going to be the impact of that? So it makes the inspection meeting, the daily inspection meeting, much more tangible, much more meaty, much more focused. And then, Ali's right that, they might adjust something in that meeting. And actually, that's fairly Scrum-like, because if you look at what the purpose of the daily Scrum is, according to the Scrum Guide, it's to adjust the plan. Okay, it's not just those 3 questions. So, and so the other thing I think is, we get this circular diagram about Scrum with another circle on top of it. I think that infers to some people that they do exactly the same thing time after time after time, right? And that diagram doesn't appear in the Scrum Guide, by the way, but I just think people have started to abuse Scrum and started to abuse the intent. So I really wanted to get somewhere where the team coach was focused on performance improvements rather than repetition of a cycle.
Yeah. And so is it the team coach that helps get these mental models propagated throughout the organization? Or, Steve, maybe that's something else, since you chimed in on that as well. Like, what role or who is it that at least initially helps, bring that to the masses? I mean, I have my own thoughts, so I know what I'm going to answer, but I wanted to
give me your thoughts then first. Let's see how aligned we are.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I mean, initially, the team coach being the one that's got experience with these types of techniques and how we need to start getting the mindset to change, and again, painting a picture of the mental models that we want to be shared. But often in practice, that's not something that a team level coach often has the experience or the awareness to be doing. And I think that's one of the big problems that's out in the industry.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, Lisa Adkins talks about 3 levels of coaches, right? The team level coach, a program level coach, and an enterprise level coach, right? And the behaviors and the tool set and are radically different between the levels, although still within the context of, plan, do, check, adjust. So you're still using that. So I would say that the training should allow the team to start to adopt the mental model. and the training should enable management to do the practices as well. So I think who would ever provide that training, and it could be an enterprise level coach, it could be a program coach that does it. So I think that's where you would get those models coming out. But I wanted to not train the practice. I wanted to make sure that when we start to train this, that we train the mental models first, rather than training the practices. So we'd say, here's the mental model. This is where you start from. So that's the starting point. Now let's use that mental model in your context to improve.
Jon, I want to say
I have a twist. Sorry, okay?
Okay, I just a quick comment, I hope. You mentioned Lisa Adkins, who I'm a big fan of. And you said how she looked at these different levels, which were more about scope. I would suggest coaching has different levels too, a different way of breaking it down. It's how well are you getting results? How well are you doing the thing you're trying to do? And if what you're doing is what you should be doing. And I think these are two different ways of looking at coaching, not just like who I'm coaching, but how deep in the models people are using in my coaching. And I just wanted to throw that out, but I'll now hand it to you, Steve.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sorry, Steve, go on.
So I agree with you, Jon, on the last things you said, that you should start from the mental models. Absolutely. That's how I do it. I don't quite agree on that model that you have like the 3 levels of coaching, if it's on the ground floor, middle floor, or on the top. Why? Because in my view, the mental models must be the same at all levels. And to go back to what Joshua was saying, how do you make this happen? Who is the messenger who brings this into practice, into the knowledge sphere of the organization? Well, from my perspective, it really doesn't matter where the entry point is, though often I aim at the very top, at the CEO, because that's where you have the most leverage. And it doesn't matter, because once these mental models are like implanted, at least those that I promote, there is a subtle psychological mechanism. Remember, one of my 4 flows is psychological flow, which triggers what I call the enlightened self-interest, where you don't need to tell people, use the mental model. They will see it and they will say, aha, this is good for me. I want to do it. So it's self-propelling. And in the organizations where this is happening, the adoption of the, let's say, the practices that come out of the mental models happens very, very, very quickly. You don't need to have coaches on the ground that stay there for years to teach and handhold. It can literally happen in 3 or 4 months, even in large organizations. It becomes organic, self-organized, self-propelled. People sign up because they want to, because they see the self-interest in the application of such models. Of course, being models, how that model translates into decision making, and the decisions translate into action will be different at the various levels, because the various levels are dealing with different things. But because they share the same mental model and they are sharing the same interest which underlies the mental model, you're creating with this what I call the unity of purpose, the community of trust, and the entire organization just takes off. So yeah, I know I'm always out of the box.
I like the. I can't remember, Al. You'll have to tell me who said it, but there's a statement that says, all models are wrong, but some models are useful, right?
Yeah, George Box said that.
That's right, George Box. So this statistician. So I think that this, giving the teams this mental framework to work with, allows them, and the purpose of that is to allow them to continuously improve. And so therefore, I wouldn't just stay with the same model, but expecting them to basically enhance it based on experience and learning. So that means that they would they can progress. And I was looking at some of Sengi's stuff, the 5th discipline and the team learning, in order to get some of this mental models. And I put that into the Agile Lineout in order to do that. I
want to say 2 things quick about Box's quote, because one, I see one way it's continuously misused. Yes, all models are wrong. Some are useful. But that does not give you an excuse to have a bad model. I hear some, oh, well, it's all models are wrong. Like, okay, I got flaws in this, but all models are wrong. No. And relating to that, sometimes you'll have a model that is always better than this model, in which case, don't use the model that's always worse. That being said, it's interesting that sometimes having two incorrect models, but that are useful in different contexts, can be quite useful. And the easiest example to see of this is what's light? Is it a wave? That's a model. Is it a particle? That's a model. They're both wrong. They're useful in different contexts. So we want to keep that in mind, that the fact that models are partially correct does not justify that, oh, well, it's good enough because all models are wrong. That to me is just BS. But that some models are useful to have multiple models to look at different problems in different ways in different contexts. And I tweeted something that I'm thinking about this more and more. I never really quite thought about this. I said, our practices are symptoms of our models. And if you start thinking about that, it means that we should not be discussing our practices as much when we disagree as what is the model the practice is coming from. Can we understand that?
Isn't that the essence of the Mintzberg statement?
I'm not sure what the Mintzberg statement is. Quick, say it again.
It's basically that every manager has a model, and then their actions and their learning and
that's right
comes off that model. So I think that's
right. Yeah, it's not new at all. I don't think this industry likes to talk about it much.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the different methods that are out there, and they pay very little attention to the importance or significance of what they're built on. You know, they just say, "Oh, this is what we are." Like that's a good thing. It may not be a good thing.
That's a key point. Now, Mintzberg's quote is spot on, and even Singer's work with mental models is absolutely fundamental. And that is also the source of many problems we have. That every manager they have their own mental models, and the situations is exacerbated. Can I say that word? I don't know. It's getting worse. It's made worse by silos, different KPIs. KPIs are reflective of different mental models. And when you have these different mental models, you are seeding a situation of conflict, and you have conflict, performance goes down. So that's why, from my perspective, it's so important to have shared mental models. It's not sufficient to have a good mental model somewhere in the company. If the rest is not there, then it's counterproductive. You will have infights. Now, one classical example is when you start applying TOC, which typically is the theory of constraints, which typically is a huge performance a booster in one place of the company. That single place will improve so much that the surrounding places will start to feel threatened. Now, their KPIs will look bad compared to what is happening there. So the conflict just gets fueled and gets worse. But if the mental model is shared, they see, aha, they are improving over there, and I know it will benefit me because of the shared understanding of what is going on in the entire system. So yes, mental models, good mental models, and absolutely shared mental models. That's what I think companies should be aiming for.
I just saw a comment in the chat. I think it was Rob Norton Edwards that put it there. And he was asking whether the mental model we're talking about is actually the product or the priorities, or how something works. So no, what we're talking about, Rob, is the process or the mental, the thought processes behind, for example, team behavior, or when we're talking about breaking stories down, what Steve was just saying about getting flow. So there's some theories around flow. There's some theories about a value and prioritization and all of those sort of models that we're using. So it's not about the product, it's more about the people interactions, and it's more about the how, I think.
And I think the mental model has one absolutely critical element, that it is what is guiding your decision making. So mental models are the let's say the root cause of some decisions, of any decision that is being made. The mental model is a reflection of your understanding of the world, and you make a decision because you want to change that world, and you can only make that decision on the basis of how you understand the world, and that is the mental model. So the mental model is not just a theoretical construct of various theories that might come into play in explaining how things work, but it has a much more operational, actionable aspect that will result in decisions, and then the decisions become action, stuff that gets done in consequence of the mental models.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I got confused on some screen here. I was looking at I agree that mental models are important, and I agree we should try to have shared mental models. But actually, we'll never have totally shared mental models. But we can learn from that. But what we need are visible mental models. I can remember a day I spent with Kent Beck, the XP guru back a long time ago. I don't know, 15 years, way back, 17 years ago. And he and I have different mental models about things. There's a lot of overlap, but there's some disagreement. And when I realized his mental model, and I'm actually not sure I didn't shift into his because he's a smart guy. But by having it be visible, we can now reconcile the differences. We can have conversations about it, and we can move forward. And I think that difference in the mental model is where a lot of learning takes place, and we don't get stuck. So I don't think we really disagree in intention, but I just want to make it clear that I believe there is, because I'm sorry, mental models are not just how do we think the world works. Mental models is all what we should be doing. In other words, what's my purpose? That's a mental model in a sense. What am I looking for that'll make a difference in the world? You may have a different purpose than me because you're a different person and you have a different motivation. And I think that disparity is good. I don't think it's bad. But when it's not visible, it can be problematic. And I think that's the issue, that when we just start with practices, the mental models aren't present. And when you can't challenge the mental models because you have certain practices be immutable, it actually kind of locks this down.
Yeah, I did some research into sources of conflict in teams, right? And the sources in conflict in teams is predominantly around the how rather than about the what. And so I think that this is where the how is the piece that we might need to focus in on, but it's also the who as well, because obviously you get, two leaders fighting it out who's going to be the real leader. So I think we need to make sure that we've got enough around that areas to allow these teams to continuously improve and get better and so on. So I think that's what the goal was. So if I can summarize, I was looking at, go on, Joshua.
Oh, I was just going, I didn't, you can go ahead and summarize, but as we're getting kind of close on time, I do want to, Jon, ask you maybe in the last minute or two to kind of give the elevator pitch, the summary of Agile Lineout. So we've got a little bit of time to do that.
I think, the Agile Lineout is basically designed for non-software and software teams, right? It's this common approach that we can use. So that's the first thing. Agile Lineout is designed so that we can start to scale, and we can also do continuous improvement. So the focus is on, are we going to get there in each iteration? And then do we then meet the goal of the increment? And then how do we change our ways of working in order that we can improve the performance or improve the value that's delivered? So it's more like a staircase than it is a circle. So you're not going back and doing the same thing. I think Agile Lineout is slightly different because what we're doing is talking about the theory first and then the practices. And my belief is that if the people understand the theory, then they can start to adapt themselves based on their context and start to look for continuous improvement. So those are the elements that I think is there.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, I got a lot out of this. So, Jon, I really appreciate you joining us today. And I guess Steve, Al, any parting thoughts from you guys?
No, this opens up a whole can of worms. I love it.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions on mental models. So actually, let me go ahead. Our topic next week is going to be on where transformations typically could start in options, right? We typically see transformations starting in one common spot, and I guess we're going to challenge that there might be lots of other options to consider. But yeah, maybe the episode after that one we can have one on mental models and continue some of the discussion, since there were so much really good comments and activities on that.
Wow! So then it's not one can of worms that's also in it. It's a whole truckload of cans. But let's do it. Yes.
Well, I hope people got value out of this. I always like the new thoughts that come out of this. I've never left one of these sessions without 2 or 3 ideas that are just like, wow, why didn't I think of that earlier? It's interesting.
Yeah.
We always have to leave a little bit of time for that. I mean, if only to enjoy ourselves and acknowledge that we all have something to contribute. And I think that's the other issue that we tend to follow. The society tells us to follow, and we need to start learning how to do better critical thinking. Thanks, Jon. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, Jon. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Take care.